Hello everyone, I hold a view of choppers which is very similar to my view of horses. I like them as an idea, but I can't quite bring myself to fully trust one with my life and bodily integrity. Let's face it, if you had a midget strapped to your back daily, a midget who dug his pointy little fucking heels into your side and whipped your bare arse to make you run faster, you like me would be anxious to get him off your back at the first opportunity, quickly followed by stamping the little cunt into the dust so hard he'd wished he'd ticked the circus or porn boxes at the careers office. Let's just say I'm more comfortable with fixed wing. I would and have when offered the chance taken a lift in all sorts of fixed wing, even in countries where the very idea of maintenance is so offensive it's referred to in print form as the M word. The first chopper I ever saw up close had just been grounded on takeoff by a maniac who threw a house brick at the main rotor, only the skill of the pilot averted disaster. About a week later, during a front-seat joyride to a local airport, the pilot, an affable Frenchman, related how two of his colleagues had been killed the previous year when a 10-year-old with a catapult landed a direct hit on the tail rotor. These reservations were only bolstered later when taking fixed-wing lessons I would see rotary-wing students learning how to hover wildly veer all over the field like angry wasps in a room full of gingers. These experiences pretty much confirm my view that rotary-wing aircraft are what Dead Meat so accurately describes as whirlybirds of death. Despite all the aforementioned, I have managed to establish a firm friendship with the MI-8. Thanks to Casmo's videos, I was able to convince the Gazelle to tolerate my existence. However, despite extending an olive branch and bringing sugar lumps, the Huey treats me with the type of contempt generally only reserved for someone who proudly announces that they've been homeschooled. So it's with some trepidation, ladies and gentlemen, I present to you my first look and flight of the DCS MI-24P Hind. While we're here, we may as well clear up something. The name Hind is a NATO sobriquet. For quick designation and identification purposes, all Soviet choppers were given an unusual name beginning with H for helicopter, like a children's book or an 80s kids TV show. Hello boys and girls, it was a beautiful winter's day at Shindand Air Base. The large grey puffy clouds poured heaps of fresh pristine white snowflakes on the taxiways. Henry the Hind and Freddy the fuel truck were sitting by the runway. "I wish I could shoot fucking rockets at fucking mujahideen like you," said Freddy the fuel truck, looking rather wistful and more than a little depressed. "Don't worry, Freddy," said Henry the Hind with a reassuring tone to his voice. "The way this war is going, you'll soon have to run the cunts over yourself." 80s TV was rather shit. The MI-24 had its own Russian nicknames, but I'm fucked if I can pronounce any. It was known as the Flying Tank or Crocodile by the Soviets. On the outside she has an ugly beauty, sort of like a semi-attractive drag artiste. Nice legs, but the tuft of hair peeking out above the cleavage is somewhat anaesthetising to the semi you've been nursing. She has a monstrous insectoid aesthetic. An insect of death, if you will, reminiscent of a dragonfly minus the beautifully refracting wings. She's a unique bird for her time. She is both a gunship and a transport. Yes, the Huey could do both, but not at the same time. Being designed by Mikhail Milin based on the previous MI-8, she's a sleeker version of the tested formula. Alas, poor old Mikhail departed for the design bureau in the workers' paradise in the sky before the finished product rolled out. Obviously the art guys have arted the fuck out of the exterior. She looks splendid. So as the Soviet general said of the female Soviet shot putter, "Let's retire to somewhere private and see if her scrotum is as hairy as her tits." Unlike the F-14, it's the pilot who is topping this flying pride festival. I'm immediately put somewhat at ease by the presence of soothing blue panels, which are usually found in the MiG-21, and of course the absence of the rapey-looking pilot with a moustache to my left, whom one usually finds lurking somewhere in the MI-8. Unlike the MI-8, the unwary should not be overwhelmed by the quantities of breakers and buttons. The layout makes sense with electronics on the right, navigation, hydraulics and fuel on the left, and weapons control in the centre. The instrumentation is well laid out and easy to read at a glance. The pits look gorgeous, and some of my favourite little features are the pitting on the side panels, the paint rubbed off the edges of surfaces, and the instrument reflections. The bottoms pit contains not only the main weapons controls but also auxiliary flight controls should the top become incapacitated for any reason. I love the recent improvement to the canopies of all aircraft. I've heard that many of the wretched unwashed have been beating their bin lids and dipping their torches in oil regarding this. I've a little advice for those fucking dingbats. Take a seat in a real cockpit and open your eyes. Sometimes one will glance off to the left and fleetingly mistake the reflection from the navigation lights of a departing aircraft on the right for an approaching one on the left. Having more reflections and scratches adds to immersion. Of course, my favourite little feature is the fan, which momentarily jams up when fingered by the mentally challenged. Startup is fairly simple. Electrics, fuel, auxiliary power unit, engines, power generators and systems. It all makes sense, but don't forget to throttle up before you switch off the APU. Otherwise, everything will droop like your erection when you realise that the celebrity sex tape you just downloaded is Hulk Hogan's. I have to admit that performing my first hover check had my sphincter puckering so hard I can now taste my chair. This leads one to the agonising decision over whether it's safer to push forward and bugger off, or sacrifice another 2 virgins to the great collective god while trying to set her down again. If you're heavy, you can perform a rolling takeoff, but it feels more chopper jock to take off from a hover. Is chopper jock a thing? It seems wrong, like saying milk float jock or light urban rail jock. Stable flight is easily gained and very easy to maintain. However, flying in trim with my shitty rudder pedals is another fucking matter altogether. One has to remember that the collective acts very much like a throttle in a fixed wing, so if you don't back off a little when transitioning to forward flight, you'll find yourself rising uncontrollably, like Bill Cosby at a high school production of Sleeping Beauty. For an aircraft that looks so big, unwieldy and Soviet as the Mi-24, she can zigzag, turn, hover and pirouette like a ballerina. And not just any ballerina, a Soviet one that's been starved, bullied and injected with steroids since childhood. She's also extremely fast and disarmingly stable like the Mi-8. The big difference between the Mi-24 and Mi-8 is reaction speed. In the Mi-8, if one wishes to execute a 90-degree turn, one has to convene a committee of the cockpit troika. Plan an efficient yet restrained turn, creating solidarity between the crew and the control surfaces, while retaining a correct Leninist Marxist attitude in relation to the earth toiled by the glorious workers and the sky which shields the party from bourgeois reactionaries. The plan is then reviewed for any deviation from current correct party theory by the mentally challenged guy in the middle, countersigned by the rapey one with the moustache on the left, and radioed to HQ for approval. I love the Mi-8, but that's what it feels like. An oh bollocks moment in the Mi-8 slowly unfolds in front of you like a late 90s porn JPEG on dial-up, whereas in the Hind the lag between man and machine is much reduced. In the Hind, an oh bollocks moment carries the same urgency, but less of the grim Soviet resignation to one's fate. You may still get penetrated by an unlubricated cock of a calamity, but you will feel like the chopper is in the struggle with you to proactively avoid it. Navigation is very Soviet. I happen to like Soviet navigation. It never lets me down in the MiG-21 or Mi-8. With simple arithmetic, one can find one's way pretty much to or from anywhere. All that's usually involved are simple additions or subtractions of 180, like a darts player with PTSD. The map display is handy, but please remember it's a piece of paper with an overlay that operates on gyros, and like any gyro-operated system, it's going to become less accurate over time, which always makes for a good excuse for border incursions. And don't worry, wherever you land is yours now. Who the fuck's going to argue with you? It has a nice range of weapons. You can attack pretty much anything on the ground, from an Afghani birthday party to a tank. You can even drop bombs. I've no idea why this makes me so excited, but there's something quite unique about being able to see the look of surprise on the face of the fucker you're about to drop a bomb on. You can almost imagine the cartoon sound as he raises his eyebrows in surprise before the explosion. The Hind is multi-crew. In the unlikely event of you having friends, you can have a friend operate the weapons or fly the chopper. Now worry not, dear viewer. Our kindly celestial fathers at Eagle Dynamics know your very thoughts. So they know you're a bunch of antisocial, disagreeable cocksuckers who couldn't even find a friend in Jesus, Juan, Jose, or any of the other kids your parents paid to attend your 10th birthday party. For this very reason, they've created an AI friend for you. So ladies and gentlemen, say hello to your new AI friend Petrovich. At the moment he's the strong silent type, like having Sylvester Stallone in the front seat. He won't always be like that. It's just he's currently learning to speak. like Sylvester Stallone. Don't fret, he won't be learning to speak like Sylvester Stallone. Imagine trying to decipher that shit over the intercom, mumbling like Elvis, simultaneously recovering from a catastrophic head injury and coming down from a PCP binge. Fucking hell. When he's finally done, he'll be able to communicate in Russian and English, unlike Sylvester Stallone on both counts. I've a request here for ED. Please make the English voice actor do an impression of the late great Sean Connery trying to do an impression of a Russian accent. That'd be just fucking glorious. The Petrovich controls are ultra intuitive. In the bottom's pitch you can tell him where to fly, and in the top's pitch you can tell him what to target and whom to shoot. If you want to spend most of the flight as weapons officer, he'll fly the chopper for you and probably better than you. From the pilot seat you can direct him to search an area for targets, launch missiles or fire the gun. Pretty soon you'll be able to order him to select which birthday party guest to shoot first. And don't worry about the court-martial, they'll be firing AKs in the air like fucking bandidos. So in truth it can actually be quite difficult to tell the difference between a birthday party, wedding or mujahideen camp. Petrovich shows a lot of promise as an AI system. It's going to be very interesting to follow that side of development. On the subject of weapons, the MI-24 doesn't do lucky dip. Some weapons systems just don't play well together, so it's best to choose pre-configured loads. It's important to remember that the Hind is in early access. As always, before you dip into your wife's cash box, I mean the one she keeps under the bed next to her appointment book, not the other one she uses to pay your cocaine bills, otherwise known as the hairy checkbook. Make sure you check the currently available features to see they're enough to keep you happy. For me, there are enough weapons to play with. Petrovich is currently undergoing remedial education, but he's progressing quite well and I've yet to catch him licking the canopy. The damage model is work in progress and the flight model seems credible, but it'll probably undergo a few tweaks. Additionally, the systems are mostly there, but please remember that development time can vary between warp speed and geological. But if you're the type who gets all needy after a couple of months like an exigent twink, then please do yourself, and more importantly the rest of us, a huge solid. Go buy a bottle of vodka and some fucking lottery tickets instead. To sum up, the Hind is a beautiful and malevolent addition to the DCS rotary wing stable. She's Soviet, so if you like Soviet toys as I do, she's going to scratch an itch, but she's not indecipherably Soviet, like the Soviet Union. She's disarmingly responsive for her size. She's controllable, and the only element of flight that has me shitting kittens is the transition from hover to ground on landing, which requires manipulating the collective with stern gentility rarely found outside the most expensive gay bathhouses. She's definitely a thoroughbred. She's got one hell of a kick, but she's not highly strung, so she won't kick you unless you go fumbling around inside her hindquarters like a student vet trying to retrieve his wristwatch. On that glorious Soviet note, landing in almost the same position I began, I thank you very much for watching. Please don't forget to dislike or tell me to go fuck myself below.